Do you want to know how to take your score from a 1400 something to a 1500 something? Hey guys, Laura Whitmore here, founder of Strategic Test Prep. I actually did just that. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through all the steps I took to get my score from to. So stick around, and hey, listen, if you're not scoring a 1400 something, that's okay. If you're just trying to improve your SAT score, this video is going to be perfect for you. All right, guys, so when I was in high school, I was really lopsided in my SAT score. I had a 780 in math and a 640 in English. This was super frustrating for me. It didn't matter what I did, I couldn't seem to get my English score to budge. It stayed around the 640 mark. So I didn't have any strategies though, I will say that, and I didn't really prep that much or work with a coach. I just kind of went in there and took it. And as a result, I didn't get into every school I applied to. I was first in my class, but Harvard rejected me and Georgetown waitlisted me. And so I always look back on this and wonder, hey, if I had actually prepped and tried on the SAT and got a better score, would I have gotten in? Now, of course, this is a silly game to play and it is what it is. I wasn't meant to go there and that's fine. But I became a test prep coach in like 07. And I decided that I wanted to up my score because with only a 1420, I couldn't help students that were trying to get above that. So the first thing I will say to you, if you're trying to improve your score, is you've got to have a reason and you've got to want it. So for me, I wanted to be one of the best test prep coaches in the nation, and I knew I wasn't going to be that unless I could get like a top 1% score. So what I want you to do right now is think about your reason for doing better on the SAT. You've got to have something that is going to keep you motivated and driven even when the going gets tough. Because let's face it, you're not going to want to go and do SAT prep on a Saturday when you could hang out with your friends unless you have a really good reason. So comment below and let me know, what is your reason for wanting to do better? Now I'm going to walk you through the things I did to actually improve my score, especially the English score. So I'm going to talk to you guys about how I took my English score from a 640 to a 770, and then how I took my math score from a 780 to a perfect 800. All right, so let's talk about the first thing I did. Well, the first thing I did was get my hands on as many practice questions as I could. I did like tens of practice tests and thousands of practice questions because I knew the more questions I was exposed to, the more I could start to figure out how the test works and how to get better. So when I did practice questions, guys, I wasn't doing it passively. If I got a question wrong, I didn't say, oh, I got it wrong, okay, I'm moving on. I actually dove into the question and tried to figure out why my answer was wrong and why another answer was right first before looking at College Board's answer explanation. Because let's be honest, most of the time, no offense College Board, but your answer explanations suck. I would rather figure it out first and have my brain make the connection, because this is actually a learning theory known as constructivism. The father of constructivism, Jean Piaget, created this in the 1970s, and it basically states that learners learn best when they construct knowledge themselves instead of passively being given the knowledge. So I knew I had to make the connections myself for why my answer was wrong and why another answer was right, because then it would make more sense to me. And from there, I started to look at patterns. So that's the second thing that I would say for you guys. So when you get something wrong, and maybe you get the same question wrong consistently, start to notice patterns. What is going on with the right answer choice? Why is that one right? Is there one that's typically right for these? Let me give you an example. When I did the punctuation questions, I noticed a pattern with semicolons. I was like, oh wow, every time a semicolon is right, there's a complete sentence on either side of it. And so I started to look for that, and then I started getting the semicolon questions right. So that's what you're gonna wanna do as well. From there, the next thing I would say is once you figure out why your questions are wrong, once you notice patterns, start to design and develop strategies that will make the test easier for you to take. So I started to create strategies based off of my observations, but here's the thing, I didn't do it in a bubble. I collaborated with other people on it. I was really fortunate to be working with a ton of students one-on-one at that time. So I would share my strategies with them and have them test it out and see if they liked it or not. And that was really great because then I got feedback from them and I got to tweak the strategies to make them even better. And every so often I would have an amazing student who came up with their own strategy and would share it with me, and then I would incorporate it myself. So this is actually another constructivist theory called social constructivism, created by Lev Vygotsky, which basically states that learners learn best when they're collaborating with other people. So if you want to start collaborating with other people, like I would say one of the best places to do that is by taking an SAT class. If you check out our website on our events page, we will show you all the SAT classes that we have coming up. So I'll go ahead and throw the link up there for that. But what happens when you collaborate with others is you also get to expand your zone of proximal development, which basically is the zone of things that you can do or you can do with help. So unless you start working with other people who can stretch your thinking and challenge you to go into that zone of things you can do with help, you're only going to stay in the zone of can do. So definitely think about getting with other people. Now you can start by joining our strategic test prep learner community. Go ahead and click this link up here and subscribe to our email list. You will continue to get updates from us, and right now we're actually giving away our digital SAT English workbook for free. So some of the stuff I talk about today, like the strategies I've designed, are in that workbook to give you a huge head start so you don't have to figure all this stuff out from scratch. Okay, so obviously since I was a weaker English student, my reading skills were kind of subpar, to be honest. So what I realized was when I took an SAT, I would read the same paragraph like 2, 3, or even 4 times and not know what it was saying. And that was very frustrating for me. But there was a couple things going on that maybe you can relate to. The first was I had a lot of anxiety over the time limit, so I felt like I had to read really fast to get everything done, which ended up being counterproductive because when I was reading really fast, I wasn't grasping anything it was saying, and then I had to read it over and over again, which actually took even more time than if I just read it once really well. The other thing I would say is I was reading in a very passive, lazy way instead of reading actively. My skills that I needed to build specifically were paraphrasing skills and annotating skills. So I started focusing on reading a sentence and then summing it up in my own words. And then I would make little annotations in the margin so that it would make sense to me. And I made the annotations really easy and quick. So instead of writing the word increase, for example, I would just put an up arrow. So once I got good at paraphrasing, then it started to deepen my understanding, and I only had to read things one time. Not only that, but my success rate increased because I understood what it was saying more than I did before. This is a huge strategy, and I think even more important now on the digital SAT than it was before. So if you're not good at paraphrasing and annotating, start working on that. Okay, another thing was my vocabulary was really weak. So I started to build my vocabulary using the time that I was working on my SAT prep anyways, because I knew that a lot of words on the SAT continue to repeat themselves. When I encountered a word I didn't know when I was working through a question, I immediately wrote it down, looked up the definition, and put it on my list of words I didn't know. Then I would just look through that list regularly and study it. So what I'm gonna do for you guys is I actually have a list of words that commonly show up on the SAT. I'm gonna link that down in the description below. And I'm also gonna link a blog post that I wrote down in the description about linguistics, because that was another thing I started to do to really up my lexicon. I started studying Greek and Latin roots, prefixes, and suffixes because they make up a large majority of the English vocabulary we see today. So once I started to know and break down a word into its parts, I could deduce its meaning without even knowing the definition. To give you an example, when I saw the word philanthropist, I knew phil was the root for love, anthro was the root for mankind, and ist is the suffix for a person. So philanthropist is someone who loves mankind. More specifically, it's someone who donates a lot of money to charities, typically. Now, you would think I'd be very happy with my 780 in math, but to be honest with you guys, that was the most painful part for me because I could not get a perfect score no matter what I did. Every test I went and sat in on, I continued to get a 780. And I was left scratching my head wondering why. What I realized was the questions that I got wrong to give me the 780 instead of an 800 were all silly, careless mistakes. And it's so easy to make careless mistakes in the math. How did I manage to finally get the perfect 800? What I had to do was I had to give myself enough time on each section to go back to the very beginning and redo every question from scratch. Because I can't look at my work and find the mistake most of the time, and I would not recommend that for any of you. I feel like when you look through your work, again, it's kind of like reading. It's a passive way to do it instead of an active way to do it. So I started developing a lot of shortcuts in the math so that I could shave down as much time as possible so I could get back to every question again. So if you're like a high flyer in math and you're targeting a perfect 800, that would be my biggest tip for you. Lastly, and this is just as important, if not more important than the other things I've already mentioned to you, I started to up my self-care in order to optimize my performance. Because I wasn't getting enough sleep, so I was always tired. I ate way too much sugar and I would always crash, and I wasn't getting enough physical activity and I felt a lot of anxiety. So when I started to do things differently, like eat right and exercise and get enough sleep and go to bed at the same time every single night, things started to change. I started to feel great. I started to have even more focus. I swear the mind and body are connected. So when I took care of my body, cognitively, I was sharper and on the ball. So if you're going into 2024, listen, this might be a good time to set a New Year's resolution. So if you're like up at 3 in the morning on Snapchat, maybe it's time to do something differently so you can see a different result. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope this video gave you a good idea of what it takes to score in the top 1% on the SAT, or at the very least, increase your score significantly. If you like this video, definitely make sure to hit the subscribe button and notification bell below so you don't miss out on future content from me so that I can help you reach your SAT goals in 2024. Until next time, guys, happy prepping.